He knelt beside her broken body, hands trembling as he lifted the canteen to her bloodied lips. She was his enemy, the daughter of the man who'd sworn to kill every settler in the territory. But as the water touched her mouth and her eyes flickered open with desperate gratitude, something ancient stirred in his chest: humanity. What happened next would shatter everything both sides believed about hatred and honor. Because when the dust settled that morning and 200 mounted warriors appeared on his horizon like a dark storm of vengeance, he stood alone on his porch, unarmed, facing certain death. But then she stepped through his door. Before we continue, if you're feeling this story already, hit that subscribe button and smash the like button for more incredible true stories that'll move your soul. And hey, drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching this from, what city, what country. I want to know who's part of this community. Leave your thoughts below. All right, let's get into this story right now after the intro.
Indigenous West Stories.
The frontier had no mercy. It was 1873, and the land stretched endless and unforgiving beneath a sky that witnessed more blood than rain. This was a place where hatred had roots deeper than the cottonwood trees, where every sunrise brought the possibility of violence, and every sunset counted the cost. The territory belonged to no one and everyone, claimed by treaties written in languages neither side fully understood, enforced by bullets and arrows that understood only one language: survival. Ethan Walker had carved his life from this brutal soil with his bare hands and a stubborn refusal to quit. His ranch sat in a valley where the creek ran cold and clear, where the grass grew thick enough to feed cattle through the harsh winters. He'd built the cabin himself, every log notched and fitted, every nail driven with the determination of a man who believed that hard work and honest sweat could overcome anything. He was 32 years old, weathered beyond his years, with hands calloused from rope and reins, and eyes that had seen too much death for a soul that still wanted to believe in something better. But belief was a luxury in a land soaked in conflict. The Lakota Nation had lived on these plains for generations beyond counting, following the buffalo herds, raising their children under stars that sang ancient songs, honoring the earth that gave them everything. Then came the settlers, waves of them, hungry for land, driven by promises of opportunity, blind to the fact that opportunity for them meant devastation for others. The government drew lines on maps and called it progress. The soldiers built forts and called it protection. The settlers plowed the earth and called it civilization. The Lakota called it war. Ethan had never wanted to be part of it. He'd left Missouri to escape the lingering shadows of the Civil War, seeking nothing more than solitude and a chance to live on his own terms. But the frontier didn't allow for neutrality. You were either with the settlers or against them, and your skin color and language made the choice for you before you ever opened your mouth. He'd lost neighbors to raids. He'd seen burned homesteads and empty cradles. He'd ridden with posses that chased shadows through the night, returning with nothing but exhaustion and rage. The hatred between his people and the Lakota had become as natural as breathing, as inevitable as winter. That morning arrived wrapped in fog so thick Ethan could barely see 20 feet beyond his porch. October had brought the first hard frosts, and the world felt suspended between seasons, between warmth and cold, between peace and something darker. He'd risen before dawn, as always, to tend the horses and check the cattle in the near pasture. The routine kept him sane, kept him focused on the tangible work of survival rather than the larger questions he couldn't answer. He was walking back to the cabin, carrying a bucket of fresh milk, when he saw the shape on the ground near the creek. At first, he thought it was a fallen calf, maybe one that had wandered from the herd and collapsed. But as he moved closer, the fog parting like a curtain, his heart stopped. It was a woman. She lay motionless in the frost-whitened grass, her dark hair spread around her head like a crown of midnight. Blood stained the earth beneath her, stark and terrible against the pale morning light. Ethan dropped the bucket. Milk spilled across the ground, forgotten. Every instinct screamed at him to be careful, to approach with caution, to remember that danger wore many faces on the frontier. He drew his revolver, advancing slowly, scanning the tree line for any sign of an ambush. The fog revealed nothing but silence. When he reached her, he knelt and pressed 2 fingers against her neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, faint and fluttering like a captured bird. She was alive, but barely. He rolled her gently onto her back, and that's when he saw the wound. A gunshot to her left shoulder, the bullet having passed through but leaving destruction in its wake. The bleeding had slowed to a seep, but she'd lost a lot of blood. Her skin was cold, her breathing shallow. She was dying. Ethan's hands moved automatically, pressing his bandana against the wound, applying pressure. He'd seen enough injuries during the war to know what needed to be done. But then his eyes traveled to her clothing, and his blood turned to ice. She wore a dress of tanned deerskin, intricately beaded with patterns he'd seen before. Lakota designs, sacred symbols that marked status and lineage. Around her neck hung a necklace of bear claws and turquoise, the kind worn only by those of highest rank. Her face, even pale with blood loss, held a striking beauty and a dignity that spoke of nobility. This wasn't just any Lakota woman. This was someone important, maybe the daughter or wife of a chief, and she was on his land bleeding out. Terror and compassion warred in Ethan's chest. If any of the settlers found her here, they'd assume he was harboring the enemy. They'd kill her, and probably him too, asking questions later. If the Lakota found her here, they'd assume he'd shot her, that he was the reason their precious daughter lay dying. They'd torture him to death slowly, making sure he understood every second of his mistake. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to walk away, leave her for the earth to reclaim, deny he'd ever seen anything. But as he knelt there in the frost, his bandana already soaked through with her blood, Ethan Walker made a choice that would define everything that followed. He couldn't walk away. Whatever hatred existed between their peoples, whatever history of violence and betrayal lay in the past, this moment was different. This was a human being dying in front of him, and he had the power to help. It was that simple and that impossible. He scooped her up as gently as he could, cradling her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing, fragile as a wounded bird. He carried her quickly across the yard to his cabin, kicking the door open and laying her on his bed, the only bed, the one he'd built with his own hands from pine wood. He stripped away the bloodied deerskin, exposing the wound, and set to work with hot water and clean cloth, extracting fragments the bullet had left behind, stitching with the same needle and thread he used to repair saddles. She didn't wake during any of it. Her face remained pale, almost translucent, but her breathing gradually steadied. Ethan worked through the morning and into the afternoon, changing dressings, spooning water between her lips, keeping her warm with every blanket he owned. He spoke to her quietly, not knowing if she could hear, not even sure why he spoke, but finding comfort in the sound of a human voice in the silent cabin. "You're gonna be all right," he murmured, smoothing hair back from her forehead. "I don't know who you are, but you're safe here, I promise." It was a promise that might cost him everything. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Ethan stood at his window and saw them coming. At first, it was just a dark line on the distant ridge, easy to mistake for a shadow or a trick of the light. But the line grew, spreading and multiplying, and Ethan's stomach dropped as understanding crashed over him. Warriors, dozens of them, no more than dozens. They poured over the ridge like a flood, mounted on horses that moved with perfect synchronization, a force of nature made flesh and will. He counted quickly, his military training kicking in even as fear threatened to paralyze him. 50, 75, 100. More kept coming. By the time they'd crossed half the distance to his ranch, he'd stopped counting at 200. 200 Lakota warriors, fully armed, riding in formation with the precision of an army that had been born in the saddle. They were coming for her, and they thought he was responsible. Ethan looked back at the woman sleeping in his bed, her chest rising and falling with fragile life. He could still hear the echo of gunshots from somewhere to the south earlier that day, probably mercenaries or buffalo hunters, the kind of men who shot anything that moved and asked questions never. They'd wounded her, left her to die. And now, her people had tracked her blood trail straight to his door. He had minutes, maybe less. Every rational thought told him to put her outside, to show he wasn't holding her hostage. to make it clear he wasn't the enemy. But looking at her peaceful face, at the bandages he'd so carefully wrapped, at the care he'd taken to save her life, Ethan knew that moving her now could kill her as surely as a bullet. She needed rest. She needed warmth. She needed more time. Time he didn't have. The thunder of hooves shook the earth as the warriors surrounded his property in a perfect circle, cutting off every escape route with tactical brilliance. They didn't charge or yell. They simply stopped, creating a wall of flesh and horseflesh and weapons that made Ethan's cabin an island in a sea of controlled fury. The silence was more terrifying than any war cry. Ethan checked his revolver. 6 shots against 200 warriors. Mathematically absurd. Practically suicide. He set the gun on the table and walked to the door. If this was his end, he'd meet it on his feet, looking his death in the eye. He'd done worse things than show mercy. If there was a God watching, maybe that would count for something. He stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him, and raised his empty hands. The circle of warriors parted and a single rider moved forward. He was older than most of the others, perhaps 50 winters, with hair that showed silver streaks like lightning through storm clouds. He wore the regalia of a chief, a magnificent headdress of eagle feathers that fell past his shoulders, a breastplate of bone and beadwork that marked him as a leader of leaders. His face was carved from stone, every line a testament to strength and suffering, to wisdom earned through blood and loss. This was a man who'd led his people through decades of warfare, who'd watched the world he knew crumble, who'd held his children as they died from diseases brought by pale-skinned strangers. This was the great chief, and the fury in his eyes could have scorched the earth. He spoke in Lakota, the words flowing like a river over rocks, musical and harsh at the same time. Ethan didn't understand the language, but he understood the meaning. Where is she? What have you done? Give her back or die? Ethan swallowed hard, his mouth dry as dust. He spread his hands wider, trying to convey peace, trying to show he wasn't a threat. She's inside, he said, his voice rough. She's hurt bad, but she's alive. I didn't shoot her. I found her dying by the creek. I brought her inside to help. The great chief's expression didn't change. He said something sharp and commanding, and instantly 20 warriors dismounted, knocking arrows, drawing bows, aiming directly at Ethan's chest. The range was close enough that they couldn't miss, close enough that Ethan could see the eagle feathers on the arrows, could see the determination in young faces that had known nothing but war. This was the moment. This was where the story ended for Ethan Walker, killed by people he'd never wanted to fight, dying because of a misunderstanding, because hatred ran so deep that even kindness looked like violence. He closed his eyes, thinking of his mother back in Missouri, wondering if she'd ever learn what happened to him, thinking of all the sunrises he wouldn't see, all the horses he wouldn't ride, all the chances for peace that would die with him in this dusty yard. Then he heard the door open behind him. The creak of hinges was the loudest sound in the universe. Ethan's eyes snapped open, and he turned to see her standing in the doorway, barely upright, leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch he'd fashioned from a broken rake handle. She'd wrapped one of his blankets around her shoulders like a shawl, and though her face was still pale, though she swayed with weakness, her eyes were clear and burning with purpose. She spoke in Lakota, her voice carrying across the yard with a strength that belied her. Condition. The words tumbled out like a river breaking through a dam, urgent and passionate. She pointed at Ethan, then at herself, then at the warriors. She touched her bandaged shoulder, then placed her hand over her heart. She spoke for what felt like an eternity, and Ethan watched as the great chief's face transformed. The stone cracked, the fury melted. Understanding dawned like sunrise, breaking through the longest night. The great chief dismounted in one fluid motion, landing softly, despite his age. He walked toward the porch, past Ethan as if he didn't exist, climbing the steps to reach the woman. When he wrapped his arms around her, when she collapsed against him with a sob that carried years of love and relief, Ethan understood. This wasn't just the daughter of a chief. This was his daughter, his only child, the future of his people, the most precious thing in his world, and she was telling him that the enemy had saved her life. The great chief held his daughter for a long moment, supporting her weight, murmuring words in their language that needed no translation. Then he turned to Ethan, and the expression on his face was something Ethan had never expected to see from a Lakota warrior, much less a chief who'd lost countless family members to settler violence. It was respect, it was gratitude, it was the recognition of one honorable man seeing honor in another, despite everything that should have made it impossible. The chief reached up and removed the war necklace from around his own neck, a stunning piece of craftsmanship made from bear claws, wolf teeth, and stones that seemed to hold the colors of the earth itself. It was a symbol of his authority, his victories, his standing among his people. He held it for a moment, and then, with deliberate ceremony, he placed it around Ethan's neck. The weight of it settled on Ethan's shoulders like a physical manifestation of something shifting in the universe. Around them, the 200 warriors lowered their weapons. Some dismounted. The circle of death transformed into something else, something Ethan couldn't quite name but felt in his bones. The chief spoke in halting English, each word carefully chosen, heavy with meaning. You save her. You enemy. But you give water. You give life. This, he touched the necklace on Ethan's chest, mean you brother now. You family. No Lakota ever hurt you. You safe all days. Ethan's throat tightened with emotion. He didn't know how to express. He nodded, unable to speak. The chief's daughter, still leaning against her father, met Ethan's eyes and spoke softly in English that surprised him with its clarity. They shot me for sport, she said. White men with dead eyes. They laughed when I fell. I crawled to your creek to die with dignity away from their eyes, but you, her voice broke, you saw enemy and chose human. You risked everything for someone taught to hate you. My father wants you to know. This debt cannot be repaid, but it will be remembered. Your name will be spoken with honor in our lodges. Your story will be told to our children's children. She reached into the blanket and pulled out something small, pressing it into Ethan's hand. It was a small carving, a horse made from smooth stone, intricate and beautiful. My mother made this before she walked with the spirits. It protected me until today. Now it protects you. Ethan closed his fingers around the carving, feeling the smooth warmth of it, understanding the magnitude of what was being given. I just did what was right, he managed to say, what anyone should do. The chief shook his head slowly. No. Many people, many choice. You chose life when easier to choose death or looking away. That not common. That rare like white buffalo. Over the next hour, something extraordinary happened. Warriors who'd come for vengeance stayed to help. They gathered wood and stacked it neatly by Ethan's cabin, enough to last through winter. They brought deer, meat, freshly killed and dressed, hanging it in his smokehouse. They repaired a section of his fence that had been damaged in a storm weeks ago. They worked alongside him as if they'd been neighbors for years, as if the hatred and bloodshed between their peoples had never existed. The chief's daughter, whose name Ethan learned was Mahpia, meaning Sky Woman, rested inside while the men worked. Through her father, she told Ethan her story. She'd been riding with a small hunting party when they'd encountered buffalo hunters, cruel men who'd heard rumors of a chief's daughter and saw opportunity for ransom or worse. They'd scattered her guards with gunfire, shot her as she fled, and left her to die when they heard more warriors approaching. She'd hidden in the tall grass until nightfall, then dragged herself toward the creek she'd known from childhood explorations, hoping to die near water as their tradition honored. Instead, she'd found Ethan, found mercy where she'd expected bullets, found humanity where hatred should have lived. As the sun set and the warriors prepared to leave, carrying Mahpia gently on a travois cushioned with furs, the great chief spoke to Ethan one final time. Other warriors gathered around listening, and Ethan understood this was important. A moment being witnessed, a declaration being made. War come to this land like storm, the chief said, his English improving as he spoke, as if the words were finding their way back to him from some distant lesson. Storm destroy everything, good and bad, innocent and guilty. We fight because they take our land. They fight because they want our land. Round and round, blood for blood, death for death. No end, only darkness. He placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder. But you show different way. You show that man can choose path of light even in darkness. You enemy who act like brother. This, He gestured at the gathered warriors. "This 200 witness, we tell all Lakota Nation. Ethan Walker is protected. Any who harm him harm us. Any who call him enemy call us enemy." One of the younger warriors stepped forward, speaking rapidly in Lakota. The chief listened, then smiled. The first smile Ethan had seen on his weathered face. "He say you need wife. He have sister." The gathered warriors laughed, and the tension that had defined the day finally, fully broke. It was laughter of relief, of hope, of men recognizing their shared humanity despite everything that should have divided them. Ethan laughed too, the sound strange in his throat after so many hours of fear and tension. "Tell him I appreciate the offer, but I'm not much of a husband, can barely take care of myself." The translation brought more laughter, and then the chief grew serious again. "World changing fast, buffalo disappearing, our way of life ending. We know this. Fighting cannot stop what coming. But maybe," he looked at his daughter, now resting peacefully on the travois, "maybe people like you, people who choose kindness over hate, maybe you build different future, one where children not die for sins of fathers." They left as the stars emerged, a procession of warriors moving into the gathering darkness, like spirits returning to the land itself. Ethan stood on his porch watching them go, feeling the weight of the necklace around his neck, the stone horse in his pocket, and the profound sense that everything had changed. The weeks that followed brought more changes. Word spread among the settlers about what had happened, carried by a traveling merchant who'd witnessed the warriors at Ethan's ranch. Some praised him as a hero, others called him a traitor, a Lakota sympathizer, a danger to the community. He lost friends and gained others. The division ran deep, revealing how desperately some clung to hatred as their only compass. But Ethan also noticed that no raids occurred near his property. Other ranches suffered theft and violence, but his land remained untouched, protected by an invisible but absolute decree. Lakota scouts passing through would nod respectfully from a distance. Once he found fresh meat hanging from his barn door, left anonymously but clearly a gift. He heard through traders that Mahpia had recovered fully, that she'd told her story in council meetings with such passion that some of the younger warriors began questioning the endless cycle of retaliation. He heard that the great chief had used the incident to argue for attempting negotiation with settlers who showed good faith. It didn't stop the war. Too much blood had been spilled, too many treaties broken, too much land stolen for peace to take root easily. But it planted seeds. 3 months after that fateful morning, Ethan woke to find a group of riders approaching. But this time his heart didn't race with fear. He recognized the lead rider even at a distance. Mahpia rode into his yard alone this time, sitting tall and strong on a painted horse, looking every inch the leader she was born to be. She dismounted gracefully and approached with a warm smile. "Ethan Walker," she said, her English flawless now. "I come to repay debt." "There's no debt," Ethan replied immediately. "I told you." She held up a hand, silencing him gently. "Not that kind of debt. I come to offer friendship. My father and I, we talk much about future, about how our peoples might live in peace instead of war. It long path may be impossible, but paths start with single step, with people who willing to see human before seeing enemy." She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a rolled parchment, sealed with wax. "This treaty, not government treaty with lies and broken promises, this personal treaty between your ranch and my people. We promise never harm you or yours. We promise to trade fairly, to respect boundaries, to communicate honestly. In return, you promise same. You be bridge between two worlds." Ethan took the parchment, feeling its weight. "I'm just one man," he said quietly. "I can't change everything." "No," Mahpia agreed. "But you changed one thing. You changed story. Every story of hate and violence, someone can now say, 'But remember Ethan Walker who saved enemy daughter.' Every argument for more war, someone can say, 'But remember great chief who honored his daughter's savior.' Stories matter, Ethan. Stories shape what people believe possible." Over the following years, Ethan's ranch became something unique on the frontier, a neutral ground, where both settlers and Lakota could come to trade, to talk, to see each other as something other than targets. It didn't solve the larger conflicts, the government's broken promises, the theft of land, the destruction of the buffalo. These injustices continued, driving the Lakota and other nations toward reservations and cultural devastation that would echo for generations. But in that small valley, along that cold creek, something different grew. Friendships formed. Children of settlers and Lakota youth played together under careful supervision. Elders from both sides shared stories around fires that warmed rather than destroyed. Ethan taught some Lakota youth about cattle ranching and farming, skills that would help them survive the coming forced changes. In return, they taught him about the land's deeper rhythms, about tracking and medicine plants, about seeing the earth as relative rather than resource. Mapia visited regularly, bringing her father when his health allowed. The great chief aged rapidly in those years, worn down by watching his world disappear, but he always greeted Ethan with genuine warmth, calling him brother in a voice that carried no irony, only truth. On the day the great chief died, Mapia came to tell Ethan personally. She sat on his porch, tears streaming down her face, and said, "His last words were about you. He said you proved that courage is not fighting strongest, but choosing kindness when it costs everything." Years turned to decades. The frontier closed. The wild lands were carved into properties and towns. The Lakota were forced onto reservations, their way of life systematically destroyed by policies designed to erase their culture. Ethan watched it happen with a broken heart, using what influence he had to advocate for better treatment, sending letters to government officials that were mostly ignored, sheltering families when he could. Mapia became a leader of her people, fighting with words and law rather than weapons, trying to navigate a world that seemed determined to crush everything her ancestors had built. She and Ethan remained lifelong friends, their bond forged in that moment when water and compassion had broken through walls of hatred. When Ethan Walker died at the age of 78, his funeral was attended by both settlers and Lakota in equal numbers. They stood together around his grave. These people who'd been enemies, united in honoring a man who'd shown them a different way. Mapia, herself elderly now, placed the stone horse on his coffin, the protection charm coming full circle, guiding him into whatever came next. But the story didn't end with his death. The treaty he'd made, the friendships he'd forged, the example he'd set, these rippled outward through time. Children who'd played together in his yard grew up to advocate for reconciliation. Stories of the day 200 warriors came for vengeance and left in peace were told and retold, growing into legend, reminding people that even in the darkest times, even when hatred feels inevitable, another choice exists. The choice to see the human behind the enemy label, the choice to offer water to the wounded, regardless of what side they'd fought for, the choice to risk everything for the possibility of something better. Ethan Walker was just one man who made one choice on one cold October morning. But that choice created circles that spread like ripples on his creek, touching shores he'd never seen, carrying a message forward through time. That kindness is not weakness, that mercy is not surrender, and that the bravest thing a human can do is choose compassion when hatred would be easier. The frontier was brutal, yes. History remembers the violence, the betrayals, the genocides, the stolen lands. These truths matter and must never be forgotten. But history should also remember the exceptions, the moments when people transcended their fear and hatred, when enemies became brothers, when a simple act of mercy changed the trajectory of lives and proved that humanity's better nature can survive even in humanity's darkest chapters. That's the story of Ethan Walker and the 200 warriors who came for vengeance and left as witnesses to a different way. A story of water given when it would have been easier to walk away. A story proving that one person choosing light in the darkness can illuminate paths others didn't know existed.